Welcome to Fire Engineering's Google Hangout. Today we got a great show for you, but we'd like to start off by thanking Tenkata. We got to visit with them at FDIC. What a great vendor who's dedicated to firefighter safety. Today we have the boss with us, the editor-in-chief of Fire Engineering. If you haven't had an opportunity to see the addresses at FDIC, the opening ceremonies, I encourage everybody to go online, fireengineeringfdic.com, and really take a look at Chief Halton's speech, Steve Pegram's speech, and everyone else at FDIC. But with no further ado, Chief Halton, please open this up.
Hi, thank you, Frank, for that beautiful introduction. I guess some of you who are regular listeners might notice that I'm not in my regular office. I'm actually in Shannon's office, and I just wanted to stop in for a moment. I asked Frank if he wouldn't mind if I just took a few moments to say thank you so much to everybody who attended FDIC. I'm so grateful to you all for coming. I think that it's really our show. It's not Penwell's show. It's not Fire Engineering's show. This show belongs to the fire service, and PJ and Frank, who are both on our advisory board, can tell you that the advisory board picks the classes. Everybody has to submit. It's a true story. Frank can back me up. Chief Bernasini and I put in to do a class last year called The Fog of the Fireground, and we got turned down. I got the rejection letter hanging in my office. So it's an absolutely fair system. There's all kinds of criteria that come into play for how you get in and how you don't get in, and so I can't pull any strings for you. We don't do that. There are other shows that do that. God bless them. There's two ways to do shows. My good friend Kirk Eisenson runs a show by invitation only, and it works for him, and God bless him. That's not how we do FDIC. But I wanted to thank everybody who came. I want to thank all the incredible vendors and manufacturers who supported us, and I want to thank the Indianapolis Police Department, the Indianapolis Fire Department, and the Convention Center people who were just amazing. We were just at about 33,000 people, which is an amazing number. 33,000 attendees, which is just a phenomenal number. Frank and PJ did wonderful educational programs. PJ did an incredible class. I hope he gets a chance to talk about it. Sean Gray is actually in Tulsa. I'm going to be seeing Sean tomorrow. We're both speaking for the Oklahoma Chiefs little thing they're doing here. So Sean and I will be speaking there tomorrow, and I'll have a chance to visit with him. Maybe we'll do some Periscope thing or something like that. But I apologize. I can't stay on today's call. Like an idiot, I fell into a storm shelter this morning in my garage and broke some ribs and busted up my arm, and so I need to go deal with that. I need to go. I'm old and not very bright, so I opened the storm shelter last night because we had tornadoes, and then I forgot to close it, and then this morning I fell into it. So you can't make this stuff up. So that's who's running Fire Engineering, an old man who can't get out of his own way. So pretty pathetic story. So I'm going to go take care of these health issues, but I'll be back on the road tomorrow. I'll be in Snyder, New York this weekend. If you're up in that area, I'd love to see you. I'll be speaking there. I'll be in West Virginia next Wednesday, CFSI dinner on Thursday, and then National Volunteer Fire Council on Friday. So if you're at any of those events next week, please come up, and I'd love to have a cup of coffee with you and visit. And again, to everybody who came and to everybody who supported it, and to all the thousands and thousands of people who contributed to that incredible event, I can't begin to tell you how grateful I am, how thankful I am that so many passionate, dedicated, lovely people exist in this world and are willing to sacrifice their time and energy and efforts to move this incredible industry forward and make such a difference. So I'll get out of your way. Tenkata, thank you, Tenkata. I love Tenkata. If you don't know about Tenkata, please go to tenkata.com. They're the only inherently fire-resistant fabrics in the market today. No chemicals, nothing added. Inherently fire-resistant fabrics. You need to understand how your gear is made and what it's made out of. Please support our dear friends at Tenkata. Do me a favor, go to their site. Absolutely love Tenkata. Absolutely love Frank and the team, and PJ. You guys are just the best. Justin, everybody. I can't tell you how much I love you guys. I got to go take some pain medicine and pass out somewhere. So seriously. All right, so I love you. God bless you.
God bless you. Take care, Bobby. PJ, we're going to pass it off to you. Our thoughts and prayers are with Chief Halton. Just real quick on FDIC, I want to thank Shannon and Scott Nelson for doing just such a phenomenal job with all of the radio shows and Google Hangouts at FDIC. It's always the people in the background that get everything done, and PJ, myself, and Bobby Halton, we take all the credit all the time, but really the educational part of FDIC couldn't be done without the people behind the scenes, so we really appreciate what they do, and we appreciate Tinkata.
I can't say anything more except it was a great week, but there are a few things I want to make sure that our followers are aware of. I know every one of you, unfortunately, can't get to FDIC every year. Starting May 1st, there will be classes posted once a month, starting in May, of FDIC classes that were recorded during the week. So those will be up on FDIC.com along the right side of the screen under Demand Webcast. And between now and May 1st, there's 24 classes from 2015 that are posted on FDIC.com that you can go to today. And I would also encourage you to go to FDIC.com and look at Chief Halton's keynote, look at Steve Peagram's keynote, look at Derek Alconis' keynote, and you get the bonus. We get to see Chief Halton twice, once each day. Phenomenal speeches, as Frank was saying. So I'd encourage you to get over to FDIC.com, check out those speeches, backtrack a little, start getting some of those classes banged out from last year between now and May 1st, and then May 1st, one per month, live from FDIC. You're going to see some recorded classes that were recorded live last week. Frank, they recorded your class this year or just last year?
Last year my class is on demand, and this year's class there's 20 minutes of it. The first 20 minutes of the class is up on FDIC and fire engineering as well. So check that out and really make it a priority to get some of your firefighters and personnel out to FDIC. If you've never been there before, there's nothing like having 33,000 firefighters, all minded, all there just to learn. And as Chief Halton says, PJ, myself, we put in proposals each year, and it has to go through peer review. So nobody gets there on their lawyer. I can't even talk today. Nobody gets there just because of who they are. Everybody has to go through the same peer review. So it's a great show, and because of our sponsors, let's get this kicked off here. We got a guy in a nice office before he gets evicted.
So today we have our friend who our listeners have seen before. We have Ernie St here, who's a senior risk control specialist with PMA Companies. We also have Joe Kapp, who's a corporate industrial hygienist from PMA Companies. And you may find it kind of interesting why we're bringing corporate individuals to this health and safety show to talk about firefighters. However, recently, my department safety committee really took a proactive stance with the full support of our chief. They met with our chief and identified that, hey, we may have some weaknesses. We may have an area that we could improve on, but we don't know if we're weak or not. We don't know if we have areas to improve on, but we want to look at our hearing protection program, and are we exposing our firefighters to unnecessary levels of noise that could be hurting our membership immediately, but also long term. Either the safety committee, myself, or the chief say, yeah, it's a problem. So let's find out if there's a problem. So the safety committee worked in conjunction with the chief of the department. They worked together along with Ernie and Joe, who's joining us today, and they came in and they looked at all of our equipment. They used some equipment that I know Joe's going to show us, and they took measurements from inside our cabs, outside the cabs of the truck, while responding to emergencies, while responding on non-emergencies, while testing our equipment using our power saws and our extrication tools. And they measured all this equipment, and now Joe has the luxury of trying to figure out what all this data means and put it into a comprehensive report so we can see if there's any area of improvements that we can make. And we may find some areas, we may not find any areas, but what's great about it is this was endorsed by the union and it was endorsed by the chief to identify any weaknesses that we may have. And Joe may tell us when he gets done analyzing the data that, hey, we're where we're supposed to be and we're doing a great job, or he may say, you know what, you are doing a great job, but there's a couple areas of weaknesses that you can improve on for the membership of the department, and that's what we're looking to. We're looking to make it better for the members of the department for something like, you kind of take for granted. Yeah, I know we're should put earplugs on or some type of ear protection when I'm starting to soft my daily checks, but I can't tell you if I actually ever have. It's one of those things that we don't think about. So now we'll be able to look at the data and see where we're actually at. So, Frank, I don't know if you want to go ahead and jump in on that with some thoughts. Well, I see your wheels spinning there, and then we'll turn it over to Ernie and Joe and get their input on it.
Yeah, I'm here to really learn from Ernie and Joe because we're having issues in New Haven, and we see members who are now getting to retirement age, and some not even at retirement age, that are having hearing problems. And one of the things that I've always advocated for, but I think we need to do a better job of advocating for, I'm real curious to hear Ernie and Joe's take on this, but 20 years ago when I worked in Bethesda Chevy Chase Rescue Squad, we had headsets, and it not only improved size up, communication, and all the things that went into strategy and tactics of the fire department, but it also allowed hearing protection. And that technology with the headsets have advanced from the last 20 years to allow more ambient noise in for drivers. They have all these different setups, but yet in New England, we seem to be well beyond the curve when it comes to headsets. It's so bad in New Haven, the tiller, the individual who tillers the back of the apparatus, cannot talk to the driver up front without hitting a button. It's kind of like the 3 horns to back up, 2 horns to go forward, and 1 to stop is still the prevalent means, or you have to take your hands off the wheel to press the button to communicate with the driver. And it's the aerial noise set, that audible link on an aerial ladder. It's not even designed for that. So we're in the Stone Ages, so we really do need the insurance company to come in and give us a hand. What's your take on those headsets?
Well, hey, Joe, I think we need to back up a little bit first.
Oh, okay.
But
trying to get to the heart of the matter here.
I'll get to Frank's there. First of all, this is my second opportunity, so I greatly appreciate it. PMA is a full support TPA for PJ's department, and we provide risk control services for the city of New Haven. We identified a potential concern, brought the right resources in. Everybody and anybody has that same opportunity, and I know PJ and I were talking about that. So if you're at a different area in the country, look towards your potential insurance carrier, potential TPA, look for the risk control services. Maybe there's a regulatory compliance consultant out there. And then what I do is I bring my technical experts in. So I have a couple categories, and Joe and I have worked tremendous together over my 8.5-year career with PMA. Joe is a technical expert, and that's kind of where I go to. I can take a client so far, but then we need someone that has the science and the background and the professionalism. So Joe, I'm going to hand this off to you. What is an industrial hygienist?
An industrial hygienist is someone who protects worker health, just like a lot of other safety people, except we look and we go out and evaluate the workplace. We provide recognition, evaluation, and control to protect worker health. And a lot of times we focus on chemical hazards and physical hazards like noise or ergonomic hazards. There's a wide spectrum of workplace hazards out there. Industrial hygiene is an old term. It's kind of but occupational health, it kind of came out of mining and a lot of other industries, I mean, going back hundreds and hundreds of years, but that's pretty much what we do. So a lot of what we did recently, and what I do a lot, is go out and we evaluate the workplace and we collect measurements to quantify what the exposure is, so we can also not only just subjectively evaluate it, because sometimes you can go out and just look at a situation and say, hey, we know we have a problem here, we need to take some action. But sometimes it's nice to have some numbers and quantify what that exposure is and see where we're at, and then we can select the right level of protective gear to mitigate the hazard.
I'm going to echo that and talk about more of an industrial hygiene person. He didn't mention respiratory. So it's anything that can harm me internally. So there's a lot of different sciences and different approaches and different reference standards that he can go to get baseline measurements, and that's kind of what we did in this assessment. The other thing that I want to talk about too is the culture of a department. And I've been doing this 25 years. I've been doing environmental health and safety about 25 years now. And there's 3 things we can do. You either have a culture of progression, we have a culture of acceptance, or we have a culture of avoidance. And that is scary. Progression without the science behind something, getting the wrong personal protective equipment because the vendor told me I have to have it. Being too aggressive and progressive like that can put you in harm's way. Accepting it as the norm and stuff like that is you're not challenging yourself. I want to challenge to learn. I want to challenge to make sure we're doing the right thing. Did technology change? Did the standard change? So we're always going to kind of look to better ourselves. The last thing is culture of avoidance, and that to me is a death wish. And unfortunately, we have that from manufacturing all the way to municipal environment to the fire service. You have cultures of avoidance. I don't want to touch that. It's always been that way, and that's how we're going to handle it. This approach that we took was, let's go help the chief. He reached out. The safety committee reached out. They were part of the process. They were part of the resolve. We do have some initial data that we're kind of working with, but I think the process of how we approached it was very methodic, very real, and we had the buy-in from all levels. That's important to put out a good product. So, Joe, can you go into, I guess, the discipline and how we look at all the exposures in the fire service?
Well, regarding noise particularly, we looked at the different equipment that you have, your apparatus, right? And we certainly looked to see where the sirens were on your newer vehicles. And historically, fire departments had, the location of a lot of their alarm equipment and sirens and horns were not on the front bumper, and they were up higher and behind the cab maybe. And the fire department, the firefighters themselves were not situated inside a cab. Today, the equipment is designed much differently with a lot more improvements to insulate and to dampen the effect of noise from outside the cab.
And Joe, this would be a good point to talk about the hierarchy of control.
Yeah, ideally, that's a good point. Thank you, Ernie. Great segue. Engineering control. So that would be an engineering control that was put in place by the manufacturer based on experience, and over time we said, hey, we have a problem here. We have an exposure, and so they designed the equipment differently to eliminate the hazard, or at least reduce it as much as possible for that type of response that you have. So the next step would be an administrative control or work practice control in the workplace. And then lastly would be your PPE, something like I got a couple of different styles here. We have earplugs, or these foam plugs, or a set of ear muffs, which everyone's kind of familiar with. And you mentioned, Frank, the headsets and that sort of thing. That would be a very nice in engineering control, and as well as a PPE, a little mix of everything. It provides excellent.
See with engineered controls is a lot of it's designed for when the windows are up.
Right.
And so they put all this effort into reducing noise in the cab, but firefighters are firefighters, and they're going to have the windows down. So that's why I see the headsets really have an intrinsic value.
Yep.
And a really solid engineered control, because it actually helps them do their job better, because they can communicate better going to the call. And that's what I've experienced. And it's almost like the hearing protection is second. It's something.
Right.
It's something that it helps. It's not like I'm putting this on for my hearing protection, which is great. But here we're putting this on so we can go to work, and it's just inherently protecting your hearing, which I think is an ideal engineered control.
It is, but Frank, what I learned as I sat back and I was able to kind of shadow Joe and Ernie on one of the 2 days that they're in our department is we can put those headsets on, but are they the right headsets?
Well, no,
is
that's why we're
is
here.
it actually helping us? You know what I mean?
Right,
The foam earplugs. You could have, one of my members put foam earplugs in every time he or she does something every day.
Yeah.
But it may not be helping them, right? And if we move from this foam earplug to this foam earplug, we're going to help him or her that much more. So that's why these engineering controls are great. However, I think as firefighters, what do? I'll call up my vendor, hey, send me a box of foam earplugs, right? But I take no time to look at those foam earplugs to make sure that the right engineering control for the right mechanism of what we're doing. So it was really, really enlightening that.
So what you're saying is chiefs, because of failed leadership, need to do their job that always isn't sexy. It's not always about running the fire or worrying about the tornado or the storm. As a chief, you have a responsibility to your members to do the stuff that's not sexy, to roll up your sleeves, do your homework, reach out to some of these great resources, work with the union, and try to protect our members.
I can piggyback that by saying NFPA 1500 states it. OSHA states it. So we have an obligation to do an assessment, and that assessment brings in the technical expertise to make a sound decision. No pun intended there.
No, I think that's phenomenal because I didn't even know about Joe.
Yeah.
I've seen up close the great work that Ernie has done for the New Haven Fire Department, but I didn't know that that was a resource that we have. So this is great seeing Joe here today.
So one of the things that we talk about too is, and I know there's guys on this Google chat that they're cringing. I'm not wearing these foam plugs while I'm cutting a roof. I'm not wearing while I got a hot situation. I get it. Joe and I will spell that out. We'll talk about what 1500 does say. It doesn't want to impede any operations and make things unsafe and more of a risk. So we'll talk about that. So we went through what I call the hierarchy control, because that's really important as we address anything. We want to make sure that we have a system, a written documentation, guidelines, SOP, SOGs. Then you want to look at, can I minimize the employee's exposure by maybe doing some sort of work control? Can I change out what's going on? And a lot of times we talk about is maybe putting a chemical in place and maybe putting one that's less harmful. So that's a change out schedule, that's something like that. But in this case, your PPE is the last line of defense. We talk about your turnout gear, your gear. That's the last line of defense, isn't it?
Yeah.
So very much like what you're, and again, we're not talking about fireground operations, wearing some of these items, but going to a fire, communication is so important. We had a firefighter, and he was I think driver of engine 6 maybe. He said, I have to crack the window down no matter what degree temperature it is, no matter what call we're going to, it has to be halfway down. And he goes, I want to hear that ambient noise out there. I want to see if I have to make an evasive maneuver. I want to make sure I'm in control of my environment. And I took notes, and I wrote that down, and I'm like, okay, what's the sound level when he cracks the window? So we had a baseline of that. We had that information.
Great.
And to me, it was real life. This guy was like, no, I'm not rolling it up. He was adamant. I've been doing this for 22 years. I said, okay, we got it. Joe and I did find some things that were not out of the norm. The manufacturers of the piece of equipment do have their technical data or cut sheet, and it tells you what the interior cab ambient noise should be. And we can pull that technical data and match it and see if we got to that. But your older piece of equipment, we got to watch what we're putting on for add-ons. We got to watch what we're taking out of the cab, because some of the softer material in there, fabric, will absorb the noise. So if we go put these rigid, I'm just going to pleather or whatever leather surfaces on there, that may not absorb some of the noise, and we may mess with the ambient noise that's inside that cab. So, Joe, I know you had a couple great technical points that you wanted to cover. You want to go right into them?
Sure. The working with the fire department was a real pleasure. I just want to say that because of the fire department, you guys are already using a lot of PPE, and you're really experts when it comes to PPE, particularly respirators, and assessing situations and making decisions on the fly. And the difficult application with noise in your situation is it may not be safe to be using a certain device like a foam earplug like this, or other devices. These are inserts. These are custom inserts that you can get.
You guys want to know the contour of Joe's ear and the mold. That's the interior of his ear.
As opposed to this, which the worker has to scrunch down and then get it to go in their ear and fit and do all that. Essentially, it's got to come up with that shape. It's pretty hard to do. They make other ones that occlude the opening, like this device, which you can just put right in, which are a little easier. But the danger with this is in a high temperature environment, this material can melt in the ear of the firefighter. We certainly don't want that. Could catch on fire. It's not rated for that. So there are real limitations. And so some of the key things that we found was the highest noise levels that we recorded were the routine testing of equipment like saws and other things that are on the apparatus. We had levels of 110 decibels. when we're testing that equipment. Short duration, a couple of minutes, so our average all-day level might be below an OSHA level or the guideline in the NFPA standard of 90 decibels, but there are those short durations, and it's those moments where we can use hearing protection. And PJ brought it up before, we were talking earlier about maybe personal exposures outside of work. Perhaps you're doing something else outside, maybe firearms, hunting, musicians, those types of exposures, and to use your hearing protection when you're doing that, those are things that you can do to prevent hearing loss. You brought up, Frank, the older firefighters that are reaching retirement. Sometimes once the hearing damage is done, always, there's not much you can do about that. The nerve endings in the ear are damaged. Now, does that mean, how do we find out how that happened or not? Well, that's a different discussion, really, but it's important that firefighters know there are things that you can do, like train your firefighters on the hazards of noise. Maybe some audiometric testing upon hire, especially for the new guys, and train the young guys coming in to say, hey, use your hearing protection, use your muffs when you're going to test this equipment. This is what we want you to do. And that was the nice joint survey that we were able to do with the union, and everyone was very involved and responsive to affect a change. We put things into place, say, okay, we can do that, and keep some ear muffs handy when they're going to test that equipment and work together on things like that. The audiometric testing is also nice because it can identify where you have a problem and maybe prevent it. And in that audiometric testing process, where you go and actually to a audiologist and they test your hearing, level of hearing, that's an excellent opportunity, an interface with a medical professional to train that employee on what they're doing and what they want to, how they can protect their hearing, both at work and outside of work. Noise is hearing loss is tricky because it's not like we break our arm or something or get hurt or fall down and we have an injury or broken arm or cut. This happens slowly over time, and we tend not to notice it, or we tend to downplay it and think it's not a problem. But after several years, all of a sudden you get tinnitus and ringing in your ears, and you lose your hearing. Once it's gone, that's a terrible thing. So we want to do everything we can to prevent that.
So Joe, why don't you outline between you and Ernie? Maybe Ernie, you can start on how this actually began. We talked that it was a partnership between the union and the safety committee, and then you brought Joe in. So why don't we talk of what the process actually is of analyzing our equipment, and maybe I'm not sure if Joe has it available, if he has dosimeters available,
Yep.
which he does.
Yep.
He could show what those look like, and we could talk a little bit about the actual process of gathering the data. But just before we do that, we're about the halfway mark. I just want another shout out to Takata,
right.
because 7 out of 10 of us are actually wearing their turnout gear. So it's the number one source to go to takatafabric.com and look at their materials and learn more about the protective gear as far as personal protective equipment. So Ernie, why don't you talk, because I know it's
Can we give a plug to PMA Risk Control Services as a
PMA Risk Control Services? I'm not sure if I'm familiar with that.
When they start sponsoring the next show.
Yeah. Listen, Chief Hall was on. I know he's injured today, but he'd be more than happy to have PMA sponsor some Google Hangouts.
We can also do an assessment of the storm cover that he left open there too. So what took place was we had 2 members from the Fire Service Safety Committee reach out to me, and I try not to do anything unless I have executive officer buy-in. Not that I wouldn't help them and point them in the right direction. A lot of times I have to educate them to know what they're looking for too. So we'll spend a little bit of time during a discussion, and actually we had a great conversation, and Mario, right? Carmen, excuse me.
Leo.
Carmen was really adamant about saying, like, listen, this is something I feel personal. I have some concerns with. Can you educate us? And then reached out to the chief, and chief took about 3 days to get back to me and said, yeah, come on in. If we have an issue, we'll address it. So we scheduled it out. I have to go by Joe's calendar. He's a busy guy. He's a one-man operation down there in Blue Bell, Pennsylvania. And he got back to me with some dates. We kind of did our homework prior to coming out. We looked at some case studies and some historical data on the fire service. We were able to get some data on the equipment that you had and started looking at the manufacturer specs on them. We looked at some of the tools and got the manufacturer specs on those as well. So we had a little bit, probably like 60% of the puzzle going into the assessment. Going into the assessment, Joe was kind enough to come up with a ton of gadgets. And Joe, why don't you talk about probably the best way to describe where you're getting your data from, how are you benchmarking against ANSI, OSHA, and all of that?
Okay. Well, we decided we would do a couple of things. One, we would do some sound level testing as part of the survey. So this is a typical sound level meter. This is a windscreen to protect the microphone, and this is a great tool, ANSI certified tool, and this is a calibrator, this little device, and you turn it on, and let's see if you can hear that. It's a audible tone of 114 decibels, and that calibrates our device to make sure that the instrument's working properly as it should, and we do that before and after sampling. And we take measurements, as Ernie mentioned earlier, and PJ had mentioned, as the vehicles were moving, with the windows up, with the windows down, and with the sirens going, with the sirens not going. We went on response on a couple of calls. We went inside a building with hopes of that the alarms inside that building would go off, but on that particular response, the building alarm system did not activate. It was for a medical emergency, so it wasn't the whole high-rise alarm system wasn't piercing the ears going in. Unfortunately, we didn't get that data, but one can imagine, and firefighters know better than anybody, that the alarm systems in those buildings are quite loud. And then this is another device that we can use. This is a dosimeter, a noise dosimeter, a dose meter. It measures noise continuously on the worker. So the worker would put this on, you would put it on the worker's belt, and then they would hook it on up by their ear and measure the amount of noise exposure throughout the work shift, and we collected that data.
That's usually over an 8-hour process. We'd like to capture 8 hours.
Yeah, we can do it for 8 hours. We can do it for 10 or 12. We can do it for 4 hours. We can do different things, and then we can extrapolate and use that information to make estimates. This is also a dosimeter, same type of units, just newer and wireless and smaller and lighter. These are nice. The workers love these, and they work well. These older ones are a little more tried and true and heavier duty, but what you end up with, I'll show you. This is something, this is a graph of our two different things. These are just, I pulled from data that I've taken in different manufacturing sites. And here at the bottom, you can see a typical manufacturing site, like in a machine shop, where you have continuous noise throughout the day. Then the person goes to lunch, comes back in the afternoon, and they have more continuous noise where they're maybe, fabricating machinery or making holes in sheet metal continuously. And then here is something more like firefighting, where the noise levels go up and down quite a lot. Unfortunately, I don't have the equipment noise on this, but you would see a larger peak up here for when we're testing a loud piece of equipment. So the data that you get from your survey is nice, because this graph can help train employees to say, hey, this is where we got our exposure. Let's find out what we did, and I made notes as we were doing the survey, what time things were happening, and then we can take that time signature and say, okay, let's see if we can engineer this differently. And if we can't, because often you cannot, then that's when we want to either use some type of control. For noise and radiation, it's time, distance, and shielding are the primary ways of protecting someone. And noise is a form of a wave, a form of radiation, a lot like sunlight. So it's incident on the ear and the mechanisms inside the ear, eardrum, then the inner the middle ear moves some bones, and then it hits some nerve endings inside and sends a signal to our brain, and that's how we're hearing each other talk and speak, which is rather amazing in and of itself. And the wind and things like that we take for granted. So those are some of the pieces of equipment that we used, and the data and what it's going to look like. And then we formulate, we take all the measurements and we look at it and we compare them to some guidelines or perhaps a standard, maybe OSHA permissible exposure limits or the action level. And there's different ways of measuring noise, and it can get fairly complicated. But as long as someone knows what they're doing and knows what to do with the data in the end to explain it and implement controls based on those results is what you need, and that's what we do.
Joe, some of the firefighters and officers listening today may think that some of this testing is very intrusive, and how are we going to go about our normal day, with this big dosimeter, shoved in our face, everything that we're doing. And what Joe didn't show was they had a very small dosimeter, smaller than my cell phone. Joe, do you have one there?
Yep. Yeah, I think this is it.
Perfect. So he had that dosimeter, and all he did was they went around and they clipped those on like the upper lapel on the shoulder for a bunch of firefighters working on the day shift. Very clear, told them what to do. If they got a fire, had to put on their turnout gear, just take it off and put it out of the way, because my concern was now they're going to put an air pack on over that, damage equipment, but it's also going to have a bunch of injured shoulders.
Right.
So all the firefighters bought into it. They wore those for the day as often as they could. During the daily morning checks, then Joe was standing there with the larger dosimeter, measuring the sound from all the equipment. Then we put them on trucks. We put them on the apparatus. They went for some drives. They took in some runs. Some of the runs they opened the windows. Some of the runs they kept the windows closed, just to truly see what we were exposed to throughout the entire day. And this was over a 2-day event. We're a smaller department, so it didn't take them that often, that long to accomplish it. But it was totally intrusive. The guys didn't even really know he was there, except, and Joe, this is no dig, but all the questions. Fire service is not something that Joe's used to, so he had a lot of, firefighting questions on what we're exposed to and how we do our jobs. And I was able to see his wheels are really spinning on, okay, well, when you go to the roof and you're using a saw, you should be wearing this hearing protection, but that's not possible. And I saw those wheels spinning. We had great discussions on that. And what we realized is, yes, there are exposures that we can't do much about. It's part of our job. However, what we've clearly identified is that when you're checking your saws out at the beginning of the day, why not minimize your exposures then? When you're driving in the trucks, if you're not like the one firefighter that has to have the window open, and you have a climate control system with an air conditioning and heat, keep the windows closed, because we saw significant difference between the windows open or closed. But if you're going to want to have the windows open, what can you do to minimize your risk with what type of ear protection, whether it's a headset like you had in Chevy Chase, or whether it's the foam plugs, but what do we need to do now for those instances? And I think we're going to, I'm really anxious to see all the data, because we have buy-in from the union, from the safety committee, and from the chief, so we can take these areas of weakness, areas that were bad and areas of weaknesses, and improve on them for the members.
Yeah, I'd also like to see data from city departments of responding in between the high-rises and see if that has an impact on the noise level, because it seems to, when you're driving downtown New Haven and you're going through, you're basically in a canyon. I'd like to see the impact of the noise level in the cabs when that occurs too, because that may be something they're not testing for.
Well, that's a different exposure in New Haven, and we don't have it in East Haven. We don't have those. Like I even mentioned, I was talking to Joe and asked a question. We have one section of town where we go under I-95, and I've always noticed as soon as you hit that bridge, and it gets much louder in the cab, because the sound is reverbing or bouncing off of the bridge. But the problem for us is it's such a short peak. It's such a short span. It can be measured, but he has to do. There's things that he has to put in place to measure those. So I'm sure that if maybe if you knew somebody at PMA and you could work out something with your safety committee, they can come in and do something for the city of New Haven as well.
Wow, I like that.
Put Joe to work.
The short-term exposures are interesting. That's hard sometimes to capture, and continuous noise is the real problem. What you're referring to is nuisance noise. It's still hazardous, but it is it is a nuisance, and it's not. It can stress you out. Just like somebody yelling in the background or something in your house or something while you're trying to read a book. not the same, but it's similar. So you have these nuisance noise events, and over the whole shift, that level, it may not really affect your overall noise exposure, but it is annoying. So there are a couple of things that I just listed, about 6 or 7 things to do, and one of them is, where possible, travel with what we found was traveling with the windows up, or maybe even partially up, can help. Training on the use of hearing protection devices, I mentioned that. Participate in a hearing conservation program, which we're helping to draft up and from up here for their outfit, and that is really important. A lot of fire departments have them, some don't, and they need to be retooled with data and information, so you can have that hearing conservation program, that written program, address the areas of concern that are unique to your fire department and your workers. And the audiometric testing, as I mentioned, and things like that are very important. And the training of the guys is probably one of the most important things on the use, the proper use. If you have a phone plug and the person puts it in their ear and you look at them dead on and it's hanging out of their ear, it's not attenuating anything. It really isn't. And I'll tell you, they're hard to get in. I don't know. We've all tried it, and it is something that is difficult to do. So I encourage them to take some time to work with the equipment that they're going to have and they're going to use when they're testing their equipment, or they're going to respond or use. So that's important.
Joe, I also want to add, we're going back to approaching this from a scientific and technical piece. This brings up one of my biggest pet peeves, that we can go onto our smartphones.
So I was just going to go.
And, and grab an app, and that app will be great. It's a dosimeter, sound level meter. So I had 2 phones, 3 different apps, and we were close to 15 to 18 decibels away on the calibrated dosimeter or the calibrated noise level meter versus these apps. They're fine to look at. They're great. Bring them to a concert. That's fun. But don't use it for a scientific. Don't use them for really trying to protect your employees, unless they're a scientific piece of equipment.
Yeah, they're nice for. There are some nice features on there. They can show a change in sound, but frequency levels. Sometimes a microphone on our phones.
Right.
The frequency response of that microphone is not exactly the same as this. So in some frequency ranges, they're pretty much spot on. But if you get outside of that range, you can have a false negative, where you would have you would appear as though it's safe,
right,
and you can have a dangerous exposure on hand.
Simple things, a case on your phone can alter that sound. And that's
in the future, there may be plug-ins for our phones. I know those are coming. As we all know, there's so many sensors that you guys work with as firefighters, and there's going to be more and more sensors out there that we're going to have that will likely for chemical monitoring on our phones, hopefully. So I use different sensors for direct reading, for solvents, and for noise, certainly, and for gases. I know you guys have that equipment for confined space entry and things like that. So in the future, it may be there, but we're not quite there yet. So that's a good point to bring up.
So I always think that there has to be some sort of a systematic approach, and we can't just complain about it. And I always found that if you can educate yourself enough to ask the right questions to the right people, and that should be almost a mantra going forward in the fire service. Educate yourself, find out the right questions to ask the right people, and always keep on asking questions and challenge. I always like that challenge yourself to learn, not challenge yourself to point fingers or whatever, but challenge yourself to continue to learn. One of the things that I learned on this assessment was I'm going back to some of the saw manufacturers, and they have things that on their newer equipment are called sound suppressors. So they do have filters that they can put on in some of their exhaust pipes. So on some of your saws that do exhaust, there are basically almost like a silencer, for lack of better terms. They have some of those that are out there. Those are some of your higher end pieces of equipment that are out there. A lot of your fans, they're called hush blades or hush fans. So a lot of those fans for ventilation, they're out there. So there's maybe higher end product that are out there, but they're still thinking about engineering out the risk, and I thought that was good. I also want to address Frank Ricci's concern about the communication piece of devices. So I went out and looked at 3 or 4 different manufacturers, and they're all probably evolved 40 to 50 times since, was it 20 plus years ago you were there, right? So the concern is, when you buy a system, the system has to be supported by, now they have software for those comms. So it becomes more of an expensive system. Then there's multiple headsets on the truck. So you're talking about a Tillerman plus 2 in the cab, right? At a minimum, I would assume, right? Three in the cab, yeah. So right there we have 4 headsets, and then we want them to maybe all connect and communicate, and then maybe plug them in somewhere else to use them. So there really narrows down to like 3 manufacturers, and I don't want to give them up because they're still in the infantile stages of developing the white noise availability to you and I have a conversation next to us, but yet suppress some of the ambient noise that are out there. So there are some technical documents out there. I know, Joe, did you do any look at that as well? Did you have a chance to take a look at that?
I've not done a detailed certain research on that, but I, anecdotally and from what I've done with different fire departments and have seen, is those headsets are very effective and they're preferred. And in your case, Frank, you mentioned that it was a ladder truck. Is that right? Yeah. That would be a perfect application and certainly, a much safer way to roll, I would think. So that's great. However, sometimes a lot of money can be spent on equipment, and if it's not going to be used, then now you have a problem, and maintaining it and putting it into practice. So there's a lot of things that go into that, but they can work very well.
When they're looking for personal protective equipment to have a dual purpose, what is a governing body that would help them to make sure they're buying equipment that would help them have the noise reduction? So is that ANSI?
Well, they would talk to the first thing you want to talk to the manufacturer of the equipment and see if that device, if they even give it a noise reduction rating. The different hearing protection devices have something called an NRR, noise reduction rating, and maybe it's a reduction of 25 decibels, or maybe it's 30. And a pair of muffs, somewhere around 20, 25 roughly is the benchmark for muffs. Now, if you have situational awareness on your muffs, you may have some slight openings in the cuts, basically, in the foam, which allows sound to come in. And then you have the communication device on the inside. The nice thing about that is they're not turning the speakers in the cab up on full blast and getting blasted to overcome outside noise. So they're able to communicate. It's safer. Now, as far as an actual noise reduction rating, they'd have to talk to the manufacturer, find out what they're going to assign that. If they're even able to, they may be able to give some loose numbers on it, but once you break, I have gone to manufacturing sites, a quick aside, and the guys will cut holes in their earmuffs. They're maybe sanding vehicles, and they put their earbuds in to hear whatever they listen to. They're not listening to Bach, I can tell you that. They're listening to something very loud, and and it has to overcome the grinder that they're grinding the steel away with. So they are basically creating a sound exposure, and they cut a hole in their earmuffs. And I said, hey, wait a second, what do you got there? And he goes, oh, we got a variance for that. And I said, oh, really? And so, we kind of backed up and went and talked to the safety manager and said, that's not okay. We don't cut holes in our respirators to smoke. We don't cut holes in our earplugs and our earmuffs to to hear rock and roll.
It's fun. Frank, Joe and I had the conversation. I take advantage of the summertime when I cut my grass to catch up while on your fire engineering radio shows.
Or yours. I love it.
I don't like listening to mine. I like listening to yours. Right, so I put the earbuds in, hook it up to my iPhone, and I listen. But I have to turn it up so loud to overcome the sound of the mower. I'm actually probably doing more damage to myself listening to your show than I would be if I was just cutting the grass. So
even without the hearing loss, listening to my show will do damage. It can be completely quiet.
So I'm looking into personally buying some noise-canceling headphones so I can cut my grass and listen to Frank Ricci, Politics and Tactics all at the same time.
I love this guy.
That would be the way to go.
Joe, how do you feel in regards to, like, if you were to say, hey, I got an issue with my boss. He's not buying us personal protective equipment to combat a noise issue. How do you approach it and help an employee like that?
Well, wow. I mean, they really...
You'll never get in that office if you answer this question.
You have to work. You got to go talk to them. You know, you got to kind of bring some facts and say, look, this is what I want to do. This is a safe way to go, and everyone's got to get along. It's health and safety, just like firefighting. You know, we want to save lives and prevent accidents. So, you know, that would be the way to flip it around, I would suppose.
If you go through the proper channels, if you go through your health and safety committee, that's really the place where you can put in a non-adversarial way. Like, I don't show up with my hammer at those meetings. Often I don't go.
Right.
So it's my members, the softer side of the union, that really gets to put the facts on the table in a non-adversarial way to move health and safety forward. So I would suggest to that employee, make sure you reach out to not only your union leadership, but ideally your chairman of your health and safety committee, and try to go about it the right way. Because we always accomplish more with health and safety when management and labor works together, and you don't always need to bring the hammer. Trust me, when I need to walk in the room with the hammer, I'll bring the bat. But the fact of the matter is, the Health and Safety Committee is really, I think, the place to get it done, working together with management.
And I like to say, what do I say, Ernie? It takes 20 seconds of courage.
Yep.
It takes 20 seconds of courage to have that uncomfortable conversation, to get everybody on the same page, to look at how we're hurting our membership, and now let's come together to figure out what the best way is to protect
them. And everybody wants to be able to hear their kids or grandkids when they retire. You know, maybe not the wife, but you know, you can't pick and choose hearing loss. So the fact of the matter is, everybody wants to be able to hear what's going on around them. There's nothing more frustrating if you. My neighbor is a Green Beret from Iraq, IED'd, and just not only from that, but also just constant gunfire throughout his whole career. You could just see the frustration on his face when he can't hear something. So it's real, it's tangible. Your career seems like it's going to last forever, but the fact of the matter is, for a fire department career of 20, 25 years, that career goes by like this, and then you have the rest of your life. So you got to take care of your wife, your husband, your kids, and your own health and safety, because the job will come and go, and eventually you want to be able to be rewarded for placing your life at risk for all those years. So, as I like to say, when I was in Catholic school, they asked me what I wanted to be when I grew up. I raised my hand and said, I want to be a retired fireman. So,
wow.
Want to enjoy that retirement.
Right.
I'm still impressed that he was in Catholic school.
I wasn't. Never let the truth get in the way of a good story.
So, I mean, the key point you guys all talked about is to have a conversation, have a courageous conversation, be bold and great stuff. I just want to share a story that took place last Thursday, and I was in a manufacturing situation. An employee came up to me, you're always here, but nothing gets done. I said, okay. We have our safety committee meetings. When you leave, nothing gets done. And I said, I've been following up on a lot of things. Have you been communicated in what we're executing? No. So the safety committees don't celebrate what they've done, and that's a big. It may not be everything that's on that person's agenda or wants to get done. So when I went back to her workspace, she started talking about, see how loud and noisy it is here. And I said, you're absolutely right. It's ridiculous. How do you stand it? And she was like, well, I've complained about this for last week. Something changed over a week ago. And I just sat there and tried to pinpoint where the noise was coming from. It was a pulley that had lost its bearings, and it was winding out, shut the machine down, locked it out, went to the mechanics, told the guy, I said, this machine needs to be fixed. I said, do your analysis, but I think it's the bearing. It was a $17 part. $17 part made this poor woman happy, took away the noise exposure. Like you said before, sometimes people get on edge because of the noise. You're getting that stress. She was relieved. I got Neil's Donuts out of the deal. Nothing better than that.
Nothing better than Neil's Donuts.
This is health and safety. We're supposed to.
Oh wait, not wellness.
Wellness. Yeah,
Celery.
safety. Not wellness.
I got a fruit platter. Yeah.
Oh, there you go.
The truth did come out. I'm sorry. But no, that's as simple as, like you said, having that explore, ask the right questions, keep on asking things to learn and educate, not point blame, but going at it and saying, there's an approach here that I think I can come at and really make this person feel successful, feel that they had a value in that conversation. So, and that comes to, you know, what took place in your fire department as well. It was a really good experience.
Yeah.
Right. Well, it was, you know, we're grateful that we had have a proactive union, and that's supported by the chief, and they can work together with PMA companies to bring Joe up and yourself to do this testing. And, you know, what do you recommend the departments or the listeners today that don't have resources available, such as the PMA companies? And there's a lot of parts of the country that's probably watching right now that they may not have a PMA company. Where can they start? What can they do?
Sure. Well, we'll address it by, you know, either they have a town planner, mayor, or an elected official. Somewhere in that rank, there's somebody handling their insurance, whether it's a risk manager or it could be HR, it could be a town planner, somebody. Reach out to them, because some of their policies might say they have some loss control services attached to those policies. If they don't have that, then some states have a state plan OSHA that has free consultation.
Right.
And if they don't have that, then you can go to the federal OSHA, and then they run, I believe it's monthly topics related to educating the public on industrial hygiene and safety issues. You could then say, hey, can we make one topic next month or the month after coming up all about noise? So that person's now educating themselves using the federal resource or something like that, getting their education to bring back the right questions to ask. To get a technical service, unfortunately, there might be a fee involved, so you have to look at budgetary concerns or adding that into the budget. There's a lot of different venues you can go to. There are local consultants that are industrial hygienists. You know, we're a national program. We're available whenever you want, but at the same time, that may be the starting point. But you can also see if there's a college, like up in New Hampshire, there's Keene State College. There's a whole industrial hygiene a department that would be willing to come out and do an assessment as part of their work studies, you know, for their graduating degrees. You might be able to get a free service that way.
There's resources out there. You just got to be willing to
look for them.
Yeah, turn over a couple of rocks and find it.
Yeah.
Well,
Absolutely.
I think we made some good progress. I don't know if you want to start wrapping this up a little bit.
Well, we'd just like to thank Joe. Hopefully I'll meet you soon.
Yeah.
Ernie, you do great work for your company and for firefighter safety across the state. And I know that our viewers get a lot out of these. They're probably not the sexiest shows on fire engineering for Google Hangouts, because we're not talking about tactics, but this is the work, and this work needs to be done, and it's important because we all want to be able to retire. I want to just thank Tenkata again. None of this would be possible without them, you know, without their dedication to fire engineering, the fire engineering hangouts, and what they do for firefighters across the entire country. To you, PJ.
Every day. They're protecting us every day. 7 out of 10 of us are wearing their products, so we're grateful for that and for their support. Like Frank said, this isn't one of the most sexiest topics. However, this is what's going to protect you, not just your 20 years in the job, but for the life and for retirement. And that's what we try to bring you each and every month through the blessing of Chief Halton giving us this opportunity. So for him, we're grateful. Chief, if you watch this in the archives, watch out for those holes in the floor and those storm shelters, and I hope you feel better. Get patched up quick. But I think that's it for today.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Fire Engineering Google Hangout for today, fireengineering.com. Thank you.